Alrighty, so here are the parts of the propeller. You got blades, you've got hubs, you got that part that's going to be make the main part of the hub. It's got a couple holes in it, and you got the cap pieces, and then you've got a piece of wire that goes between them. So the first thing I did was to roll that up. I should have just used like a handle of a paintbrush, but I for some reason thought this piece of wire would work better. It didn't. So using something like a paintbrush would be a lot easier because this isn't that critical. But what I did find was there is no tab to hold it together. So I modified it by making a little tab because you can butt glue that, I suppose. But I'm not Polish. So I decided to just cut a little piece of paper, a little scrap, and make a little tab just like is done with lots of pieces that go around like this. Put a little glue on it and attach it to one piece, one side of that piece that's going to be the outside of the hub where the props will attach, blades will attach. And then I was able to roll that around and glue it and make it into a nice little flat cylinder. Otherwise, I think I would have had a problem. You can butt joint it, absolutely. But in this case, I'm going to have a piece of wire that goes right through that seam. And I thought, well, a little piece to buttress it would also be a good idea. So those are kind of the two reasons why I ended up doing that. Anyway, once that's together, I put it in a piece of bamboo, and because I had to make sure I could make this little hole, because it turns out the hole for the wire is right at that seam. This is just me kind of poking a hole and making sure it goes through, and I'm using the piece of bamboo as a backing. So there's the piece of wire going through. I kind of measured it to go up into the blades, but not to the very tip. And then I put a little mark in the center so I know if it's just kind of in the center, it'll be close enough. Put a little glue on either side, little super glue in this case, just to cement it in place. Keep those nice and solid on there. Hit it with a little bit of zip kicker here, I believe, just to ensure that it stays put. This is not a structural piece or anything. That doesn't really matter, but that way I know it's in there, not going anywhere. Then it's a matter of just simply putting some glue on the ends and putting the two wooden pieces on. So each of these pieces goes on, and you just push it down and make sure it's clean and get rid of some of the excess glue. You can see little bits of glue on the sides. It dries clear, but you sort of can press it with your fingers, and that can kind of make it disappear as well. And then turn her over and do the same thing on the other side. A little bit of glue. And this tacky glue is fantastic because it fills seams. Again, it works quick because it is tacky pretty fast. It's just really seems to be pretty ideal for these. I'd like to try some of the Oohoo glue because that apparently is a even better, but I don't have access to that easily, at least in the States. Anyway, pushing that down, you can see that one side has a hole in it because that's where it's going to go over the prop shaft on the engine. And now I am adding some glue to each of the wood pieces to put on the little back plates. So there's one that obviously is supposed to have a hole in it. And here, I think it's here that I take a piece of wire and just make sure that the hole is in line with the other hole, because that's the piece that's going to go up against the engine, of course. The other side has a tiny little piece. I don't think I showed putting it on, but there's a little circular piece that fits on the front that's sort of like makes it look three-dimensional. It just goes in the dead center. But that piece there, just put a little glue on it once you pick it up, and put it on the other side centered, and then there's your hub completely done. And it's actually, it seems really simple, but it's actually quite convincing. I made various propellers in various ways, and this one seems kind of simple, but when it's all said and done, it looks pretty good in there, and you'll see that it's not bad. I mean, there are other better ways to make propellers, but this is a simple way, and the worst thing is where the blades butt up. against the hub, they got to look pretty good. Now what I'm doing here is there's a little line. Do you see the line on all the blades? It's curved down towards the base. I'm making that, putting a little embossing that, because I'm assuming that has to be bent a little bit to give the right shape. Um, and I kind of use it to form the blade, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. Now, I make the blades, I put that piece of wire in there, thicker wire, and roll it, because I'm actually rolling the blades so that they have like a curve in them lengthwise, because I want them to come together and not just be flat. If they're flat, they'll look just like flat pieces of paper and they look really dumb. So you have to roll them a little bit. Normal people or people with more skill will actually put something inside, like a piece of faired wood or tubing of some kind, like paper tubing that's telescoping a little bit, to give it some shape. I just, in this size, with these simple World War I era blades, I just roll them so that they're slightly, I guess, convex. And then when I glue them together, I just don't squash them down flat. I glue them on the very edges, and I end up with a three-dimensional blade that looks thicker and looks the part just fine. So you're making sure here that you get the edges all contained, and then, oh yeah, here I'm getting the very, very edge done. You can see there's a little bit of white showing through in places. I can touch those up with a little bit of paint later. But here I'm making sure that the inside, I'm trying to sort of roll it so that they will come in contact with each other. Then I take the end of this other little forceps and stick it on the end and kind of force it open so I have a little football-shaped opening in there. So you can see it fits like that. Now the thing is, actually, you can't see it too well where you're looking, but it's actually got some shape to it. And it will ultimately just slide right down. All you got to do is make sure you get it's a pusher propeller, so you got to make sure you get the blades facing the right way. So I used some pictures, and also there's a little line on that base of that hub to make sure you get it right. Because, as the propeller spins, it has to grab the wind and has to push it forward of the propeller as opposed to back behind the propeller, which is typical. So you say I put a little glue on the piece of wire and a little glue at the base, and I can see on that hub the angle at which it has to come together. So I just slide it in, and it grabs a little bit in the blades in there, and you can see I twist it and turn it, and then snug it up against the hub. And a little glue squishes out, but you take a little. I use just a paintbrush, an old paintbrush, and kind of remove that. And if there's a gap, which there was in this case, what I end up doing is taking some of that tacky glue and putting it in there and using it almost like filler. And see, I kind of brush it over in place. And when that dries, especially at the end, when we're all done with this, I'll show you how it looks. There it is attached to the engine. And I didn't show that because it's very simple. Oh, I also attached and built that little handle. And that was just super easy. That's why I didn't show it. Now, the last part here for this installment is the window, the front end. So it's two pieces, and I colored it either side. And I have a piece of clear acetate here, like that goes inside little notebooks and things. And I glued one side down using contact cement in this case. It was an experiment. I had some 3M contact cement. I used this on some model rockets before, and it seemed to work really well. Let that dry. Let it dry in this case overnight. But the idea is to then take this side, put some contact glue on it. Once I've made sure everything is covered with a Sharpie, and then I would just sandwich these together, just like that, very carefully. Let that dry overnight, and then the next day come back and cut all this out at the very edge. You should have a very smooth little skinny edge. At least that was the plan. Spoiler alert, it actually worked really well. So here it is the next day, and I've put it together and I let it dry overnight. So there it is. It's both sides with the clear plastic sandwiched in between. Now you just kind of delicately cut this, and you cut many light passes to cut through the paper and to get to the plastic. The plastic is very thin, so it's easy to cut. but you just don't force it. You want to make sure you just sort of take your time. Don't go crazy. And you cut all the way around the edge. I left the bottom part where it's going to attach to the hull, to the top of the fuselage. I left that long initially. All I'm doing is cutting out the main rectangular piece all the way around. Top's done, and then I do either end. And I'm just leaving that little black edge around there. And with a sharp blade, and again, multiple cuts, it works very, very well. And you end up with a real nice piece. Now, see the little white ears are still on there. I have to cut those off, but what I did with that was, just like the fella from those Polish websites have shown when they cut out circular instruments and stuff, basically cut little tiny pieces tangentially around the curve, and you'll end up making a really nice curve, using basically calculus. Little straight edges make a curve. And the smaller the straight edges, the smaller the little inclination between each, the nicer the curve is going to look. So you just take off that little bit, and it cuts really nice. And now you got an edge of white. Remember, the inside edge has already been painted, already been hit with a Sharpie. But I went around the outside edge and got it all nice and blackened, so it looks good, looks the part. Then I carefully went back and did the last piece, which is the piece that's going to go up against the body itself. And there you have it. I did notice, and then I colored that bottom side just to make sure that's where the glue is going to be. But I do want it to be colored, don't want to see anything. And I did notice, I just about to put it on, there was a little piece that was white on the top. So I got that figured out. Then I just grabbed this and added a little bit of the white glue, which again is thick and sticky, to the base. And you just don't want to get any on the actual clear part, and you're just careful, it works fine. You can see I put in a big goob on there, but you can get rid of some of it. You're just trying to get the very edge. No one's going to chin themselves on this. It's just going to sit on that front piece in front of the seats and just sit there and look like a nice windshield. It doesn't have to be cemented on it's not structural by any means. It's just supposed to look like a clear piece. And the original airplane, it hinged. So, a little space under it or whatever is okay, because there'd be hinges on there. So, all I did was very carefully, with a surgeon's hands, very carefully drop this down and made sure it's straight. Took a couple times, but I got it pretty close, and I had to readjust. And once it's on there, you just want to make sure you got the right rake. So I put mine back a little bit to let it dry backwards, and then I'm making sure that it's perpendicular. It's parallel with the edge of that lip, and then I'm trying to sight it down here, and I push it back a little bit because I wanted to have a rakish angle to make it look like it's not just straight up and down. Approximate some pictures I've seen. So there you have it. Windshield's on. There's so few things to finish. Next video will be the last one.